Beautiful.
Thank you for that. If I had thought this through just a little bit more, I would have spoken about my grandmother. I forgot it was Mother's Day, so I will speak about my grandfather. Growing up in Kenya, when schools were out, my mother drove us 2 hours to Machakos, a small town, to live with my grandparents. There we were taught all kinds of chores. There was no lolgagging. It was a lot of work. It was everything from tilling land to milking cows, to rearing chicken, to herding cattle, weaving baskets. If it is a chore, I can promise you I have learned it. Did I master it? Probably not, but I learned it. I hated the chores piece, didn't care for it at all, but I loved our evening rituals. In the evening, all the children would circle around my grandmother as she made dinner in a fireplace that looked exactly like that. She would cook, no measuring, no recipes, no direction, just throwing things in and stirring and telling us different stories about her growing up, how disciplined she was, how raggedy we were, and we just hang out and had dinner. And right at sunset, one of my older cousins would walk up holding a huge bucket of milk that has freshly been milked from the cows. And this is where our ritual began. My grandmother would take this huge bucket of milk, dump it in a huge pot and boil it. And once it was all boiled, we would all move outside and we would sit all out there. And she would pour it in a huge bucket and just stir it to cool it. When the milk was cool, she would put it in a gourd. And this is how you made yogurt. And ghee. It was also part of the chores. But that's what she did. But before it cooled, we all came with a small metallic cup so that we can get the milk when it's just right. It's a little warm, it's not cold, it's not hot. And we would grab our three-legged stools, go to my grandfather, all of us plant right in front of him, either for a story or riddles, or sometimes just funny questions. My grandfather was a very good storyteller. He would make anything come alive. And out of the stories he shared with us over time, I got a few lessons from him. And today I will share the lessons, not the stories, the lessons that I got from my grandfather. It was around this fire pit under the stairs that these lessons were shared with us. Lesson number 1, a good day becomes evident in the morning. Every morning, my grandfather would walk out, he'd look at the sky, and he'd look at us and say, "It will be a good day." Now, all the lessons I will share have been loosely translated from Kamba to Swahili, from Swahili to English. If I tried and did a direct translation from Kamba to English, I would probably butcher it. And even this is a loose translation. The second lesson, after death, a doctor. And what this means, I never understood it until I was a little more grown. He said it constantly. After death, a doctor. You will wait to address anything or fix anything when it's beyond repair. You will not address a problem until it has gotten to its very worst case scenario. And every time when something was happening, if someone was in pain and you want to wait one more day, he would always throw it out. After death, a doctor, and he would walk away. The third lesson I learned from my grandfather was without overcoming bees, you cannot get honey. Now, growing up, we didn't have the suits like you've seen people going to harvest honey, all covered up in suits. There was nothing like that. it was just smoke. You went to the beehive, you lit smoke under the beehive, and you let it smoke into the beehive, and the bees would take off, and you'd harvest honey real quick and take off before they get back. And that is what he's always said. However, there are days that it was not a lesson. We just sat around the fire pit, and he would tell us a story or he would ask us a question. One day he looked at Danny, my youngest cousin, and said, Danny, if your father borrowed $1,000 from the neighbor and $1,000 from the bank, how much money would your father pay back? Danny looked at my grandfather. He said, nothing. He said, Danny, now, think about it. Your father borrowed $1,000 from the bank, $1,000 from the neighbor. How much will he pay back? Danny looked at him and said, nothing. So my grandfather looked at Danny and said, Danny, you do not know how to count, you don't know math. Let your cousin help you. Danny said, oh, Grandpa, I know numbers, I can count, I can add, I can divide, and I know my father. What you don't know my father. So Grandpa looked at Danny and said, Danny, what do you mean? My father never paid a debt in his life. And my grandfather, we all burst out laughing. My grandfather looked over at Danny's dad, said, you know, kids say the darnest things, but they sure don't lie. Thank you very much.